Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from seeing the new film, How to Train Your Dragon. And I even saw it in 3D! When I'm watching How to Train Your Dragon, first off, 3D, really great, design, excellent, you know, and DreamWorks for me isn't good most of the time, you know. They're pretty bad. I think the best one was like Kung Fu Panda, and Kung Fu Panda is alright, but it's not that great, you know what I'm saying? But like this, I really liked. I like the voice of the main character, Hiccup. I don't really remember his name, but he was really good, which surprised me because if you watch any ads or any trailers, he's annoying. I thought he was annoying, so he really won me over. American Ferrera is usually pretty good. I honestly felt like most of the time she was like reading lines. She was like, "Oh, Hiccup, you shouldn't have that dragon." Okay. I hope they didn't pay you too much for their sake. So they use pretty obvious supporting people like Jonah Hill and McLovin. David Tennant has a small role because if you're Doctor Who, you can be in a big movie, but not for more than like 5 minutes because there's like some U.S. trading embargo thing. I don't really know how that'll work out. The design was really good. I like design when it looks like a cartoon character. We don't have to have everything look super real. That's stupid. But this is a really cool design. You come into an animated film, right, and you get 3D tracking shots that look amazing. I mean, I do think when people are like, oh, this rivals Avatar and all that stuff, I think it does a little with the 3D stuff, and the flying sequences are great. I mean, if you think about it, a movie, like you look back on like Top Gun or something, when a flight is a big part of a film, you have to make that look really fucking good, or the movie just kind of doesn't work as well, you know? You could trace this all the way back, actually, to Hell's Angels. Is that it? Shit. Where Howard Hughes, I think, was involved, and maybe Howard Hawks and Hudson Hawk, I don't know. It almost reminds me of like when you get those like kind of fun adventure books. They're like young adult in the library. Shows how long it's been since I read. I really liked how they did the dragons and made like kind of like a animal kind of body language to them, which is really great. Dragon reminded me a lot of my cat, so that was cool. Visual consultant on this, who's also visual consultant on Wall-E, is Roger Deakins, who for many and myself is probably the greatest cinematographer living right now. I don't know, he doesn't have an Oscar for some reason. He usually works with the Coen brothers. I mean, I will see something if he shot it and if he's involved. So I didn't know that until the credits rolled. I was like, holy shit, I'm glad I saw this. But I think he definitely like helps, because DreamWorks not really good with the camera movements that Pixar's achieved. If you're a fan of animation, if you like kind of fun, you're like a fun, good movie where at the end you like get a nice ending and then you go home, you feel good. This is what you should be seeing. Don't see like any of this other bullshit that's out right now. Just see this because this is really good, you know? And I think this is like universal. Everybody would like this movie. I know some people aren't gonna because there's cartoons and you're scared of them. But, you know, fine, see a crappy movie because you're dumb. That's fine by me. I don't care. I'm sure Katzenberg has lots of money, you know, for Shrek 15. Shrek Goes to the Moon with the Harlem Globetrotters. So if you have seen this film and like to talk about it or tell me that you hated it or you liked it or your theater experience or whatever, comment down below. And subscribe if you would like to. And that's about it. And this is all. She reminds me, or Toothless, reminding me of her. You're like Toothless, right? You do not like this at all. This video should be called How to Piss Off Your Cat. Put her in a video and put it on YouTube. Put some fucking stupid ass music below it. See you next time!
Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film How to Train Your Dragon 2. The thing about this movie and this sequel is it doesn't really care so much about trying to make the same film it made last time, which is refreshing in a lot of ways. The opening scene has the same narration that was in the original How to Train Your Dragon, with Hiccup setting everything up. And at the beginning, I kind of felt a little let down because it didn't have the same tracking shot and that amazing sequence at the beginning of the first How to Train Your Dragon. But I very quickly realized it's a different film and I shouldn't really be comparing them. Certainly that's what a lot of people are going to talk about when talking about How to Train Your Dragon 2. But it's really not even attempting to do that. That was a simpler film. That was really just about a boy meeting a dragon and becoming best friends with him. And this is more about the world that they now live in because of that interaction, because Hiccup has gotten older and the whole island has their own dragons, and what the world is like now that he's exploring and seeing what's going on beyond just their little island. There's a lot of films and a lot of franchises try to set up entire worlds. They try to set up all these different characters that are going to be big deals later and have all these complications, and most of them kind of fall apart. But this film really felt like it was having all this stuff going on and doing it successfully, and you still understand the characters, you still understand their motivations, you understand why they're doing certain things, and you care about them if they get hurt. I felt that suspense. I got worried when Toothless would fall down or Hiccup might get hurt. When they were in trouble, I was worried, and that connection's there. And it's maybe some of that is from the first film, and I think a lot of these sequels can run off of that kind of reverberating energy that's still there when it comes to these characters. Whatever the case may be, it seems to wear it well and wear that complications in a way that makes a really compelling, fun, amazing kind of 3-act, big-budget animated film. Probably one of the better animated sequels I've seen, especially probably the best animated sequel I've seen come out of DreamWorks, at least so far. Not that that's saying much. Hiccup, who has been traveling around and seeing what's been going on outside of his little island, and discovers through dragon trappers that there is a giant dragon army led by Drago Bloodfist. He wants to kind of go to him and show him that dragons are more peaceful, that they don't have to be weapons, they can be more than that. But his father is against that, knowing what Drago Bloodfist is capable of, and his father is very worried and locks up all the dragons. But Hiccup goes off anyway, and then eventually meets up with his mother, Volka, learns of the hidden fortress of dragons that she has, and that she has been taking care of these 20 years that everyone thought she was kidnapped by a dragon, but that dragon took her back to this den, and she has been living there for the past 20 years. And Hiccup must use his new mother and the whole island to kind of stop Drago Bloodfist. The first film has these amazing tracking shots, and in 3D, and it's just mind-blowing. And the first film was one of the best, flat-out best films I've seen in 3D. It was just so amazing seeing some of those flying sequences. This film still is a great film to see in 3D. In fact, I would say the only way to see this is in 3D. I wouldn't even see this in 2D. I didn't consider seeing it in 2D because of the first film, and in this film, I can honestly say the same thing. Most of the time you pay for 3D and you're like, oh hey, that one part was cool, but in this film, it really looks amazing. But the tracking shots aren't there. So at the beginning of the film, when they kind of try to do that and they don't do it as successfully, I was disappointed, like I said before. But when you see some of the things where they'll have two characters talking and dragons playing in the background, or there's a fight sequence where you see these two giant dragons and two people fighting in the foreground and they're fighting in the background, they have this deep focus with the 3D, it just looks amazing. They do that deep focus 3D thing where they have the multiple planes going on, that it's just something that I haven't seen Hollywood 3D films even attempt. The amount of stuff going on in the frame in some of these shots is just amazing. Now Roger Deakins, who's one of the best cinematographers around, he used to be the Coen Brothers cinematographer, was the visual consultant on the first film. He's back again as visual consultant, and he definitely helps. And I think this film does more of what Pixar used to do this, and I haven't seen them do it in a while, where it really looked like there was almost like a camera in an animated film. Like they would rack focus, they would understand lighting. I mean, the lighting in this film is very beautiful. When he's flying above the clouds at one point and he first meets his mom, the lighting is beautiful. I mean, the things they do with lighting in this film are so much more advanced than the first film. You can really tell that the technology's gotten better, and apparently this is the first time they're using kind of newer technology. They're showing it off with this film, and boy does it look beautiful. They really use the lighting in a way that I think I haven't seen from Blue Sky, from Pixar, from anybody. And the way they're using the camera, it almost looks like they're like, well, we want to do even more with the camera than we did in the last film. Let's do different things. You know, let's visually make this a different kind of movie. And they really do, actually. The way they really use the foreground and the background and everything that's going on in the frame in some of these is really sophisticated. And so much more sophisticated than you expect, especially from DreamWorks. It's probably one of the best shot animated films I've seen since the first How to Train Your Dragon. I've always been kind of disappointed disappointed that more people didn't take that on when WALL-E and Ratatouille and Up were kind of doing things with that. And it seemed like animation stopped getting into that, like using the camera the way, almost like it's like a live action film. And How to Train Your Dragon 2 takes up that mantle that everyone forgot about and pushes it even further. I was so happy to have seen this film in 3D. And the interesting thing when they do all these things with this deep focus and really showing the planes and all this stuff, I didn't even think about it being in 3D as much as I did with the first How to Train Your Dragon. I could tell it was there, and it gave it so much more detail and made it so much more richer in a way, and it added to the experience, but it's not as glaring almost, even though I don't think it would look as cool if it wasn't in 3D. If this plays at a really good IMAX, I will definitely see it again, because it's just one of those films I want to see on the big screen. This is very much a big screen movie. I read in a couple reviews, people wondered if this could hold up to being played on TV. I actually wonder that as well. This is more of a big screen experience than a small screen experience. Maybe they blew their wad and overdid it a bit. I didn't feel that way because I could follow the conversations the humans were having and watch the dragons playing, and it almost made me want to have repeat viewing so I could notice all these details going on. And having all these different characters and having all the dragons playing and doing things like that shows how they kind of realize, well, how are we going to tell all this story the way we used to? It almost felt like they found out a way to visually do it so it would work for the story. This film really moves. It moves very quickly. In fact, it moves so quickly, I'm surprised it worked as well as it did on me as an audience member. I didn't think it really would because of all the plots going on. And really, if you think about not so much structured as things suddenly happen to hiccup, it's not as organic as the first film, but it really struck me in a lot of places. There's one part where Toothless is in trouble. I don't know. I think maybe because Toothless reminds me of my cat Olive, who's a black cat. Maybe I get a little too emotional. They're still best friends. You see them joke around, and they have enough of those little nice character moments that it really kind of pays off in a lot of ways. Most of the plot points in this film pay off. They're really building to something. You know, if they're going to change a character, they really let you see it. It might just be for a minute, but they seem to be able to tell that very well. Now, this film, it's directed by one of the two directors from the last film, Dean DeBalis, but his co-director from the first film, Chris Sanders, the two also directed Lilo and Stitch. He went on to direct The Croods, which actually does have an interesting tracking shot action sequence at the beginning of it, so maybe that was more of his thing, but I don't know. It is kind of interesting. This has a different feel to it since it's technically not directed by kind of is but kind of isn't the same person, since one of those people isn't there at this point. Dean DeBalis, who I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, he still has that knack for character. Apparently he did want to make this film kind of like an Empire Strikes Back, and I think it works that way because Empire is a very different film from Star Wars. This film is scary, has all those things about animation I always complain about that they don't do anymore since the classic Disney films. It has faith in its audience while also understanding its audience. He really is an interesting filmmaker, and he wanted to make this a trilogy, which I'm surprised DreamWorks would let him do. They wouldn't just make this an endless franchise like the Shrek movies, and maybe they will. Anyway, I'm curious to see how he's going to end this whole trilogy and how this is all going to wrap up, and it really feels like the story of Hiccup and Toothless growing older together, and it's an interesting story. I like that they let the characters age. You don't see that a lot in animation. How to Train Your Dragon 2, yeah, it's not the same film as How to Train Your Dragon, and maybe it is kind of the worser for it because I think the first film is better written, better structured, but it's such a great adventure movie. When I was watching this film and when I watched the first one, it's like, yeah, it's cheesy, it's like the kind of film people buy at Kmart, but it feels so much more than that. When I think about a great adventure film, whether it's Raiders or Michael Curtiz's Robin Hood, there's kind of a good feeling like when the score's going and Astrid in the first film's like, go, and then Toothless like flies through, and they always say these cheeseball things in these movies, and the score's going and I'm like believing in this character and the goodness of the world and this good versus evil dynamic and the whole 3-act thing, and I totally buy it when I see a How to Train Your Dragon movie. I totally get into it like I was a little kid, and like good will triumph over evil and everything's right in the world. And that's like kind of the thing How to Train Your Dragon is awesome at, and I love seeing that. It makes me feel like I'm a little kid watching these movies and having faith in these kind of big blockbusters and how fun and exciting they are. Even when I recognized maybe it wasn't as good as the first one, I was like, but it's such a daring adventure film that it can do the darker things while still being the cheeseball kind of big blockbuster animated film it needs to be. It does so many of these things that watching that hero fly through, and even like how they have the camera, they do it in William Wellman Wing style with the camera pointing at him so you can see like the foreground, him flying in the background, you can see everything going back in the distance. It's a really thrilling adventure film, and there's a real artistry to like a really well-made adventure movie like Raiders, like Robin Hood. This is not as good as either of those. That's a crazy thing to say. Adventure films, they cost so much money, they're these big studio things, and you kind of forget, even though you had a great time, that there's a true artistry to doing like a great adventure film. It shows kind of the top of a studio. You know, when a studio film's well made, it's like the whole studio is kind of putting forth their best effort to make a really solid adventure film, and I think DreamWorks did that with How to Train Your Dragon 2. Sure, it is a different film than the first film, and maybe it's really not as good of a film as the first film. But for How to Train Your Dragon 2 to take on all these complications and take on all these different plot lines and kind of have a plot that's kind of unorganized, but still get me to care about these characters and be so wrapped up in it as I'm watching this film, as I care about what's going to happen to Toothless and Hiccup and the mom and the dad and Astrid and everybody. DreamWorks really put their best foot forward in a way that I love to see from a studio film when they care, and it seems like they cared to make a good movie. They technically cared, they artistically cared. To me, I like when the system works. It makes me feel good about Hollywood movies. You know, I actually like a good Hollywood movie. That's a reason to go to the movies, the reason to get put on 3D glasses and to pay the extra money to see Hollywood do the best it can do technically, to present you with a thrilling adventure film, is really what the whole summer movie season's about. And when you see a studio really get it, there's something really magical about that. And I think How to Train Your Dragon shows that magic. So if you have seen How to Train Your Dragon 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. The kind of thesis or the idea of these films is to show Hiccup growing up and maturing, going from kind of the outsider weird kid in a society that is afraid of dragons to changing that society to eventually becoming the chief or the head of this Viking society, to then again reinventing it through this film. And I think that's an amazing thing to show through this trilogy, if this is the last one. And I think that's a beautiful thing to show, and it's really great for kids, but it also shows a really wonderful adventure film, and it really says a wonderful thing about life and his relationship with Toothless. I really love these films. They're probably one of my favorite franchises. It has one of the best scores. It has the best adventure score. Fuck that. It has the best adventure score and adventure theme, maybe in film history, definitely in the modern era. It is just awe-inspiringly beautiful. It is my favorite thing DreamWorks has ever done. Kung Fu Panda franchise is sort of close, but I think it's because this film, it reached me in a way. I always feel something when I'm watching this film. I always feel a love for these characters. There's moments I've cried in all three. There's moments I've sat there and felt loss and felt emotions at these films that I don't think a lot of major studio animated films try to do. The sequels to these films are almost sort of their own beast from the original, which is more of a simple story. It was probably DreamWorks' big surprise. I don't think anyone thought it was going to be as good as it was. It's maybe one of their best, if not their best film. That one was more simple. It had a certain amount of characters. But sort of what's happened through it becoming a franchise is it's taken on a lot. And in some ways that is awesome, because what it's doing visually, like there's so much going on in the frames of this. I almost wish this film was longer to hold on shots more, even just the backgrounds of it. Like these are films I really should be buying the art of books, but I also think like if they were just screenshots of, there's a time where Astrid and Hiccup are talking in front of like a beautiful kind of sunset on Berk, and the outline of Berk is so amazing. I was like, I wish that was a screensaver in itself. Like I would just watch that this entire time. But I also like watching them in the animation. The first one, it was very good, and what they did with Flight, and Roger Deakins, who is an amazing cinematographer, is a visual consultant on these films. He was a visual consultant for Pixar, but he seems to have gone to DreamWorks for these films. I mean, I don't know what he's adding to it, but all the How to Train Your Dragons films, cinematography-wise, are some of the best looking animated films any year they come out. And the second one had such an intensely smart visual composition. When I watch it again, the second one, I'm almost taken aback by how much is there and how at times I'll miss just like this little thing in the corner and this other really thing. It's visually dense, it's visually smart. It's actually far more complex than it probably gets any credit for, at least visually. Story-wise, it's easy to understand, but visually there's just so much going on. They really pack in everything into a scene. Like, it's really amazing. And I think probably because they did that so well in the second one, this third one continues that motif, much like how Kung Fu Panda 3 took on the amazing visuals of 2. I think this film did better at updating those, but I think the bigger problem with the visuals and with everything that's going on and being able to visually handle all these things is just that this film has way too many characters. That is really a problem in this movie. As much as I love this film, and it has probably the first real great ending I've seen this year. I've seen like 5 movies this year, so it's like not that impressive, but if it was, it is a great Hollywood ending. It's one of the great animation Hollywood endings. People have compared it to Toy Story 3. I would agree with that. It is an ending that had me crying, and it is like the big emotional kind of payoff of the franchise, but they're just like, what, the Kit Harington voice character is utterly useless. I don't know why he's here. Just like he could just be in one movie and not come back. Supposedly they're even gonna have the villain in the second one be in this and be like, have a redemption arc, but it's Steven Spielberg who collects checks for showing up at meetings for DreamWorks, I guess. Told them not to do it, so thank you, Steven, for that. But the rest of the storylines, I wish he had told them, like, could we cut like a lot of people, because there's like way too many. I felt like in the second one they were better at that, but they did have less stuff going on, and this has like, it's mainly about Hiccup and Toothless and the Bright Fury. Is it Light Fury or Bright Fury? What did they establish? Whatever. The white dragon. And his relationship with that, and this guy who likes to kill dragons, who's voiced by F. Murray Abraham, who, anytime you're bringing out F. Murray Abraham, I'm down. He's really great in this role, almost channeling his inner Herzog or something. I think these films are more about Hiccup and Toothless than they are about the villains, naturally, and I think this villain just plays as like a big bad, kind of not really complex one. Sometimes I've heard that complaint about this film, and I agree, but at the same time, I kind of think this film is mainly about them and their relationship, and him not sure what to do now that Hiccup has fallen in love, and where does he fit into that, and what does he do with the society of dragons, and now that the world is not okay with that, should the dragons and them keep coexisting, or should they hide, and what should they do? So it's to me, the narrative is about that, and he is more of just, the villain is more of just sort of a construct. He's kind of just pushing them towards a thing that naturally they were going to have to go through. I don't think that makes it bad. I think the sequels are sort of, like I said, they're its own thing. They have a lot going on. There's a lot of kind of world building sort of stuff. But I think the difference between the first one and the sequels is that in the first one, he discovers dragons. He becomes totally woke to what dragons plight and all that stuff. And then he changes the world. And the sequels have to deal with that world. You can't really remake the first one. You can take the themes, which is like, you know, believe in yourself and crap, you know. It's a big budget CG animated film. They're all about believing in yourself. I mean, you know, believe in yourself as long as you are in the same genre conventions that all these predisposed things are also in. I did like that this film understood what it's really about, and I think more so this one than the second one. I might like this more than the second one, although I was thinking after this film I would love to just sit down and watch the entire trilogy, you know, in one sitting or close together or something. I think this is an awesome trilogy. I think it is one of the peaks of DreamWorks. It might be DreamWorks' greatest franchise. This and Kung Fu Panda, but I think this was more solid all throughout each film. I was taken aback by how good each one was, how different each one was in some ways, how similar they were, but I think it understood the ongoing arc of what they're going to do with Hiccup and Toothless. And I love the voice cast. It was interesting that TJ Miller was replaced. And I didn't like the character Rough Nut and whatever. Those characters were featured a lot more. I don't really understand why that needed to be. They were obnoxious. I don't really like Hiccup's friends that much, other than the bigger guy who knows a lot about dragons. The rest I find fairly obnoxious. It's also interesting that this film comes to the understanding that you have seen the second one and you've seen the first one. And I mean, hey, they made a lot of money. I'm not going to disagree. It's interesting nowadays that sequels definitely immediately go, yeah, you've seen the other one. They just don't care anymore. And this one definitely is just putting you in the continuity. They don't really care, which I like. It is very to the point. I think at the beginning it moves really quickly and sort of gives itself a little more room to breathe. I wish the opening fight scene, which needs to be in there story-wise, and I think was structured the right way. It just took me a moment. I was a little surprised by how quickly they were pushing me into this thing. They are films I want to see on the big screen, and all 3 times I've been so happy that I saw them in theaters. I've seen them in 3D. I've seen them at the best screen I can, and there's certain movies certain franchises where I have to see them on an amazing screen. This franchise has been one that I've just loved on the big screen. It plays well at home as well. Particularly how they use flight, I think, is amazing. It makes these films all that much more special. It feels like there's a real care and a love to them. The director, Dean DeBalis, who previously directed, obviously, the other 2, and Lilo and Stitch, he just has such a attention to detail to these characters and a love for these characters, but also understanding of, well, who would these people really be? And I think that shows a true love for them, because there's never a sense in this franchise that, much like a lot of franchises where the characters are in this sort of weird arrested development sort of thing, or they have to be the thing the audience wants, and he seems to not really care that much. This is the way he's let these characters age, the way he's let these films be different things, kind of shows a more mature director than, I mean, especially for DreamWorks. Holy shit. For any animation director, and especially, let's say, mainstream blockbuster filmmaker, kind of shows a real sense of understanding, going for the story and what's important to the core of the story more so than anything else. And I think ultimately that's what makes this film so wonderful, and has made this franchise so wonderful. Having a sequence where it's just Toothless and the Light Fury just fly around together, and just having faith in the audience. That's another thing, is when I was watching it, how much faith this film has in the audience. I was often surprised by that, and I fell into it, and it was just a wonderful warm blanket to wrap me up and give me a good time at the movies, which these films often do. And I loved it, and I've loved it every time I've seen one of these things. And I've been reviewing stuff through this entire franchise. I love how this has become a great franchise, and how, much like in Lilo and Stitch, it understands what's important about these things, and that's about the character. Seeing these characters grow, and seeing what this is about love and maturity, and times you need to hold on to things and times you need to let things go, was beautiful, and it makes you as an audience kind of reflect on what's important, and what's important is to let people, not just yourself, but let other people be who they are. And I think when you come to a certain age, you want that future generation to be able to have that chance that maybe you didn't have, or you did have, but you want to be able to be selfless enough to let that happen. And I think the way that this film tackles that, especially with friendship, about moving on, about aging, I'm just happy to have witnessed this franchise. I wish these films would get more respect. I wish they would get more attention. I wish they'd get better showtimes at the IMAX. I just think they're probably some of the more wonderful adventure films ever made, and definitely of this era. And there's something that we probably didn't appreciate how really, truly great they were. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is a really wonderful film, and it shows me exactly what you can do with an animated film franchise. I think there's a lot of these film franchises that don't exactly know what to do with them. They're supposed to just do it because the studio asked them to, and How to Train Your Dragon naturally progresses in a way that makes it more effortless than most of these films can do. It takes on too much with all these characters. Sure, it probably
needs to let go of more characters. But the core of the story, and when I left that theater, I was on a high that very few films can ever leave me with. I was on an emotional high. I'd been through something, and this film gave me that experience. These are theatrical experiences. These are intense kind of stories. These are stories that wrap you up and get you to care and say things about real emotions while also seeing Hiccup ride his dragon, and you look at these beautiful, wonderful vistas with insane lighting and showing you the beauty and the wonderfulness of Hollywood filmmaking. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is one of DreamWorks' best films ever made, a real wonderful, amazing treat at the movies, and kind of shows you what exactly you can do with technology to use it to make just an ultimately great story. And this film did that as well as this franchise and trilogy has done, and I'm very grateful to have seen all of that. So if you have seen How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.